Brain metaphysics. The jade pagoda. Settings and regulation of the first brain region of study. We should arrive at an understanding of the brain which does not exist in the modern world, due to the lack of understanding of a simple thing, that is, having a brain versus operating a brain are not the same thing. They are two different things. As a result of this, a difficulty arises when people who are active or able to activate higher brain regions, for example, practitioners of meditation, under the disguise of meditation or nirvana, thus are able to activate vibrations of higher states. These vibrations become available to a person, and the person becomes abiding in these states. This person actually stops in development. There is no particular difference between a person who is wandering the streets. They're not developing because they do not have an understanding of operational system, an idea of how to develop such system. And a person who reached some kind of enlightenment, who also stops developing as they begin abiding. In both cases, they are abiding. Certainly, one is better off abiding in higher vibrational formats compared to lower ones. But, in fact, a person is not giving themselves an account of why it is better. Their brain chemistry gives them better experiences, but they can't even compare those two possible alternatives. Coincidentally, a practitioner can never explain to a non-practitioner what is better. The most difficult part in communication is that a person who does not operate, doesn't operate even what they have, they ask, why would I need it for? What is there in it for me? This is a limitation of thinking. How to explain anything to somebody with such limitations? Please practice. This will give you a brighter future. It is the present that needs to be brighter, not the future. Under the conditions of such existence, we need first to cultivate an understanding of how to work with the brain, or what pertains to the brain. In the old days, this wasn't so critical to do, because practitioners followed the tasks that were posed for them by those who taught them. This still exists now, but minimally. Due to distractions and deviations brought upon a person in modern times, they lose even those basic settings, tuning even to themselves, that they had. And if a person's settings to be attuned with themselves are lost, how can they tune into somebody else, and even much less so to a teaching which they need to arrive at with time, as initially a teaching is just information. Who can tell the difference between information and knowledge? Nobody. Why? Suppose you accept information even in a state of special abiding, but you need to process this information. But for you to process this information in a state of special abiding is even harder than to accept it in a lower state of existence. Yet, in a lower state of existence, a person is not processing information. In both cases, information is a feeding fire of the qualities that the person already has. For example, a person has low qualities. They would look for information to feed and sustain those low qualities. In higher states, a person is reading the scriptures and dwells on them. What does such person do? Do they understand anything there? No, they just maintain that particular vibrational frequency, which like a firebox feeds the qualities that they had from birth or that may have opened up in a person until we can perceive at this level. We won't be able to pay attention, which is already a difficulty. Right now, you listen to me, and if you agreed or disagreed with me, you already lost the game. Like I said, it needs to be processed, and even if you did process, by the time you leave this place, you enter your habitual and trained scheme of processing, which needs to be changed. We always turn on our habitual scheme of processing, which we haven't trained during our lifetimes, and we walk around, we walk all alone with the same processing scheme. You know, you can have a high level of sensation, but low level of processing, so experiencing abiding becomes like being on drugs. Yes, you are drawn to read, to sit around, to switch on some music. Due to this, many practices are lost because people turn them into pasatiempos, amusements, so people come not to study, but to hang out. People gather based on their vibrational interests, and without processing their interests, they can't explain what they're doing there. If a practitioner doesn't begin to really engage with their head, there is no point in talking any further. A practitioner can't even explain what brain region is engaged and why. What are you doing? I'm meditating. What brain region are you meditating with? It sounds crazy for today's practitioner. Really, one is supposed to meditate with a brain region? Thus, brain exists only as a receptor transmitter of vibration, but not as an operating system. It just receives and transmits, but doesn't operate. We should, if one can use this word, start with the first brain region, the brain stem located at the base of the brain in the neck region, that essentially works in one direction. The operational system of the brain stem is an active form of brain marrow. Brain marrow has mostly something to do with the vertebral column. Although in childhood it is present in bones of the skull, where it extinguishes with age and only continues in the vertebral column. Gradually, a person brings themselves down to activity of the brain marrow that supports more crude parameters of our existence and functioning. Meanwhile, a person can no longer digest and master higher parameters of our existence, and this triggers destruction of the bone marrow over time. And that's it. A person no longer can exist at the level of the physical body, and often at the level of the energetic body either. This first brain region is of utmost importance, the most important one, because the capacity of integration of brain, spinal column, and the bone marrow depends on this region. If you do not make your brain cells come down into the spinal column, it is a foundational thing for redistribution of the cells. It is a mistake to talk separately about the brain, the spinal column, and the marrow. In our body there exist 12 types of bone marrow, and they all divide by a degree of tension or effort. By the degree of tension, one can see a breakdown of functions of this effort or tension, where the arrow up represents the brain, because in the brain the most effective cells can be produced, while the spinal column produces cells of lower functions which maintain vital activity. Sometimes, depending on the relative degree of presence of either the brain or the spinal column, they may interchange their roles. Much depends on the brain. If it doesn't deliver the cells down, our organs begin to lose some minute but important construction material which should have a particular number of brain cells. Depending on this number, we can tell the degree of activity in this or that type of the marrow. if this brain region, brainstem or medulla, which is connected with concept of the brain, of reptile brain, is not functioning, it is generally meant to process connections from the cerebellum. Higher energies cannot break through from the brain to the spinal cord. There is an explanation why a person, while practicing, cannot feel the current of energy, can't understand how it flows and gathers there, because there is not enough construction material. Higher frequency energies cannot make it down the spine through medulla, because there is not enough construction material that operates during a particular task. For example, we tell a person to focus on the abdomen, but they have no way of bringing down the energy which he incorrectly processes in the head. In contrast, if a person had this brain region properly functioning and had cells that were built for this purpose, which could connect to the energy from below, the person could feel a difference immediately. Think this through. Initially, one needs to grow the cells of the brain in the abdomen, and only then think about concentrating on it. So we are sitting on for decades trying to feel something in the abdomen, and we can't. Perhaps some a little better or some a little worse, but it is a tiny percentage of those who try to focus on the abdomen and for who, physiologically or even energetically, better to say technically, it's possible. In order for this to become possible, we need to pay serious attention to this part of the neck and brain region. We need to construct the position of the head and perform dynamic practices. Why dynamic practices are of utmost importance? Precisely because they create conditions for work with this brain region. If you move your head, and if you move and your head is hanging somewhere, that's the end. You are missing the most important point, not to mention the skeletal dysfunction. Today I wish to say that neck is what we have to start with. From the beginning, the neck, nothing but the neck. Whatever you're doing, stop and throw it away. Do not waste time and money. You need to work with this area so you can move further. Certainly, it is best to move in parallel because we need time, and because you work on this area, you may run out of time to learn subsequent functions. We need to consider this. And now we will be doing exercising pertaining to this brain region. Step by step, we will attempt to grasp what I'm talking about and to develop tactile sensation. This way we begin working on the first brain region, the medulla, which is connected to our primal nature and our appearance here, which is foundational in the DNA, where functionality of consciousness is linked to the brain. Comprehend this. Our DNA has its function regarding the brain. This function is difficult to perfect, but DNA can be altered. To alter the DNA, it is a special kind of labor, and most importantly, to change the DNA, one needs to alter their concentration effort. If we develop an effort in our practice to the degree that allows us to create stronger brain cells that are this way, that is the way to alter the cellular composition of the brain and alter the DNA as a result. The rest is technology. Is that clear? If through our practice we develop brain cells that are more functional than those recorded in our DNA, we change our DNA as a result. Why one must practice? It is not practice, it's daily work to form effort that we need to develop. From another angle, if we stop developing cells that are more functional, our DNA has a spot for them to develop, begins to fall asleep. Our DNA contains 13 functional chains, and if we do not support some of them, they begin to fall asleep, and we need to support the higher chains, and therefore need to practice correctly. For example, you practice but slide into feelings imagery. You don't even understand what energies this creates. We must not let this happen. Always need to keep the task in focus, otherwise you become controlled by the energies that you do not comprehend, but you are curious. You are just curious. This point is very important. Take a note of it. Now you begin to develop some understanding of the reasons we need to practice, and most importantly, why practice needs to be regular. If you do not maintain and achieve such functioning, you won't be able to find these functions down the road. What could serve to that end? What could serve to that end? Nothing. You won't be able to find these functions, even for a simple reason. For example, you get a phone call from a fellow human with deviated functioning, and it takes your functions no time. It takes this person no time to bring your functioning in a mess. Because until you have built physical connections in your body, you can't do anything. You can't. Therefore, one must work to achieve these physical links. Until there is a permanent internal link, the external influences immediately disintegrate you according to your current format of the DNA. It is a very serious threat. One can't play it around with practice. You need to arrive at the real working settings for yourself. With this, we're going to do a meditation of essentially the first limit, which constitutes the basic practical task that we target working with this brain region. This is a totemic intention of meditation, in which our goal is to reach bi-directionality of energy flow, up-down and down-up, where as a result the energy is capable to break across the medulla, the brainstem, with higher cellular frequencies getting away to be brought through it down.